Hi, Zizaran here, and this is going to be my first attempt at a duo guide featuring my good friend Steelmage. So me and Steelmage are now doing duo MF on our private league. So it's basically, we call it Bro SF, and it is consisting of just me and Steelmage on hardcore. And instead of playing complete solo self-on, we're playing duo. And this allows us to do really cool things together. Like we are able to be basically SSF, but we have a little bit more choice in items and we can help each other farm. And that's been a fun experience with, especially getting stuck on an item and both of us farming. But we are now doing MF in a duo setup, and I figured I would make a build guide for those of you that do have a friend and you want to do the same thing. If you don't have a friend, there will probably be people asking to do this on my Discord. So if you build one of these builds and want somebody to play with, this is actually incredibly cheap to do. And it is my first time playing proper support. I have played a curse bot support before for Havoc, which was very stressful because Havoc was so fast. But yeah, this is a lot more chill and goes very slow. And yeah, I wanted to go over everything with you, and hopefully I'll get Steel to talk about his part and his build. And yeah, that's the plan. So I have never played support before, so I asked my good friend Embu, who's been my main support for a long time, like, hey, what would you do? We have nothing. We have nothing. And he was like, do you have this? And I was like, yeah. Do you have this? Do you have that? And they like pieced together a POB based on what we have. So I just wanted to show, this is, first I'll show the POB that Embu made, and then I'll show what I've actually got, because it is a little different. And we can probably post both POBs in the description down below. So the skill tree, I believe, is identical. And obviously there's can't really be a leveling section here because you're support. So level with something else. I think you pretty much really want to be at least 95. I was level 97 when I respec. So I had a Guardian SRS and I just respec that. And yeah, leveling for Guardian SRS is probably the best thing for this build. So as you can see, it's a very spread out skill tree, and it's very important. You will need literally everything here one-to-one. Like if you miss anything, it won't work. So that is very important, that everything needs to be followed here. So you can see we have loads of aura nodes here. This is probably one of the things you can skip. It's just more tank. So if you're on softcore, these three nodes, like the resist, aren't important. We are resist kept from other things. And this one, 10% armor applies to chaos damage taken from hits. That's better than the physical mitigation we have, but yeah, not as important. And then down here we have Sanctum of Thought, which is, these are also probably like the most droppable. So I guess you could go at like level 92 or something. And then the jewels. Those are the three things that are droppable. So I guess you could start slightly earlier. You do need small cluster jewels rolled with 25% increased effect. You need all these skill points. You don't need any jewels really. And then, yeah, we have loads of suppression nodes. And then a second cluster with 25% increased effect. Lots of masteries. Make sure all the masteries are ticked. And you will need the Anoint for Champion of the Cause. I had forgotten that, so I wasn't sure why everything wasn't fitting. We use an Ephemeral Edge for Energy Shield. We use a Prism Guardian for the making things blood magic and +2. You could corrupt this as well. We only have 2 right now, so we want to wait in case we die, because it is a bit sketch on hardcore. So we're basically working towards a backup kit for each of our characters in case we die. But yeah, here you need to craft with Shrieking Restoration jewels, or sorry, Shrieking Loathings. That will be 7 to 8% mana restoration. If you get 7, you have to Divine, I believe. I don't think it fits with 7. You could also do 1 higher tier of mana restoration on the helmet. But Ember tried to make this as cheap as possible for me because we had like nothing. And I think you'll be impressed with how cheap this is. The implicits I didn't initially have, and it was okay without them. Sorry, the max res implicits. So I have that on gloves, boots, and helmet for an additional max res, putting me at 86. And then shavs, very, very easy. You only need a 6 socket. It does not need to be 6 linked, so that's nice. And I have ended up changing that. I think you can actually get away with a 4 link shavs. So we'll go over that when I show my in-game character. And then it was basically just chaos rest on all the gear. And the hardest thing to get in the build was gloves with tier 1 chaos rest and +2 AoE. And as much energy shield as possible, which I did not get. Jinx Juju, very easy, anointed with Champion of the Cause. And that was all Ember told me to get. He did have some configs too where he was like, get these charms. So a 6, a 5, and a 5. However, you can actually get away with a 6% and a banner skills are free. So that works as well, which is what I have. And then, yeah, we were trying with Perfect Warlord and Perfect Spirit of Fortune. They die repeatedly. So I didn't bother with Spectres. Now, something you could do, which I think I might experiment with today. So there is a new minion, this one. Perfect Dark Marionette. Explodes and reforms. So that's important. It keeps reforming. And we can use Guardian's Blessing to cast an additional aura. Now, the only thing I could think of here would be to like run Skitterbots in addition to what I'm running. So like run one of my actual auras on Guardian Blessing. But I could also run like a Wrath or something. We're kind of running all the auras already. Kind of running everything already. So I don't know. I might just have that Spectre for the Scorch Explode. But we're pretty much maxed out on everything. So I'll go over my actual character now and what I ended up with, and it is pretty exact. So the charms, which are pretty important, I have a 9% suppression charm, which I do believe I need. Yeah, so I need at least a 8% suppression charm. Here we have banner skills have no reservation and 6% reservation. So that was enough and worked really well. Ascendancy are these. And the skill tree is pretty exact as to what Embu had. I don't have... oh, you do really want a Corrupted Blood Jewel, which was not in the guide. And I don't know, Embu said he thinks something has changed because I shouldn't have been getting Corrupted Blood from Steel attacking, but now through the Link skill I am. Because we were doing this last league, and I don't think he had Corrupting Blood immunity. But either way. Oh, and this mastery is worth explaining as well. This is 20% increased max energy shield if both equipped rings have explicit invasion. So that's pretty easy to get by Crusader rings, and you spam dense fossils. So that was pretty easy to get. Then this was the hardest thing and pretty much the only hard thing. So for this, I did Shrieking Chaos Resist Essence, ideally Deafening, until I had Intelligence. It's the only stat you care about. And then strength actually wouldn't be bad either. I did have strength problems. And then I did suffixes cannot be changed and a veiled chaos orb until you unveil AoE gems. So this is the hardest thing. This is less mandatory in softcore because you will just have less resist and you will die, which is, yeah, not a huge problem. However, turning auras back on this build fucking sucks. The belt, ideally I want this to be a Crusader crystal belt, but I can't have that. So yeah, and we have no orbs. But this was what I came up with. And then this is very easy. You just alt regal until you get double tier 2 or better on the energy shield. And then any suffix, I don't really care. Intelligence would be better, but I'm not sitting here alt regaling until I get that. Prison Guardian, Jinx Juju with the Anoint, Shavs. And at the moment, I'm using the extra links in the Shavs to lose the level gems. So I have Pure Developments and Despair, Malevolence and Generosity. And we level gems incredibly fast. It's great. Faster attacks, Smite, and that's the Val Smite we usually use there. Empower, and I do want to Val that, but we only have one right now. I could just Val it anyway. Shield Charge, and then we have the Purities here with an Enlightened. That needs to be at least level 3. And then Souling, Inspiration, Flame Dash in there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Here as well, I created this with Loathing, and you have to spam Loathings, Shrieking Loathings, until you hit Chaos Res. So if I go to hideout, you can see my resistance and stuff like that. So we're way overcapped on elemental. We have 86 chaos. So I have some wiggle room there. 100% suppression and yeah, 85 max res. Why am I missing a max res? No shot. There, and I just figured out I was actually missing the +1 max res from there. So I have 86 now. I couldn't figure out why I was 85 and the thing Emma made was 86, but I just didn't have enough levels earlier to get all of that. So I'm level 98 now. And then I have everything I want. The next thing is just more energy shields. We're on 8,000 energy shield. We haven't had that many close calls. And I would like, just in case it helps somebody who's trying to do this, the main close calls we had was because of no Corrupting Fever immunity jewel. And the fact that I didn't have all discipline. So bleeds were pretty scary. So I do have Ralikesh and I have Brian King to help with stun. Obviously I'm already freeze immune. So it's just for the stun. And I'm ailment immune. Discipline getting 21 wouldn't be bad, but you really want Wild Discipline. It will save you from like bleeds, degens, etc. And poison can be a little bit scary. But either way, that is the build I'm playing so far, and yeah, it's been a blast. I would just recommend copying Zizaran Hot Dropper and looking at the flasks and everything. And honestly, you kind of do want to get as close to 1-to-1 as you can, and there are a lot of things here that'll basically break the build. So don't try to like do too many shortcuts. I did try to explain what you don't need in the terms of skill tree and stuff for survival, but you want most of it really. But yeah, honestly, it's a blast to play. I am basically running around, and as you can see in the background, there's so much happening, but I am clicking my W button, which is my link skill, on Steel. Other than that, I am, anytime we need damage, I am doing Val Smite, I am doing Val Haste, and I found that if I do Val Haste followed by Val Smite, and then, you know, by the time those are over, they come back incredibly fast. When there's a really, really tanky thing, I will curse with Despair as well, but my mana is so fucked. So I can basically cast one Despair. I don't get to shield charge all the time. My mana's awful. And those mana ring things will cancel my link with Steel. So that's pretty awful. And you don't actually have enough to put everything on your bar. So I have Val Discord Q on my second bar. And next, let's have Steelmage talk about the strategy, how we're doing it, and a little bit about his build.
Are you ready? This is how I'm going to introduce myself to the Zizaran channel. Are you ready? Hi, Zizaran. Steel here. Do you get it? Do you get it? So, Ziz has asked me to show off a little bit of what we do when we run the maps. Obviously, he will have explained his end with his support. And so I'll explain my end and what we do. So, basically, this character is both the Magic Finder and the carry. In more traditional Magic Find setups, these would be separate, so that way you can stack as much rarity and magic and quantity as possible. But obviously we're Broasef, there's only 2 of us, so we've had to combine the role. So I'm not running crazy Magic Find. I just realized I have the wrong flask on for this, but as you can see, just running 2 Ventors, Quantity Amulet, Rarity Helm. This was just a very lucky drop. You wouldn't quite get this good of a helmet normally. You would just craft on the Rarity Unique mod, but we got lucky. And then the Divination Distiller. I also had a Goldworm setup in this tab, but I opted out because this character, as it is right now, does not need Ziz. It's fine to rely on your support, but it's a hell of a lot nicer if you don't need to. So I'm actually capped res and everything like that without Ziz, which is great. Obviously still need Ziz for when it gets really sketchy with the Abyss, which I'll talk about a bit later. So, this is based on Goratha's Caustic Arrow Mana Forged Pathfinder. You can also do more traditional Pathfinder builds like Toxic Rain, like Who was doing. They both work just fine. They're actually both solo viable. I've heard a little bit of critique. Do you need a support? No, you don't. Obviously, we're in hardcore Broasef. It just makes sense for us to play together, and it makes it safer. But if you're in softcore, maybe you have more gear, of course, or maybe you're in a 3-man team and you have a carry and a Magic Find, like I said, separate. You'd be fine without the Eurobot probably. But you know, again, with us, it just makes a lot of sense for us to play this way. In terms of what the strategy actually is, so turns out the League mechanic, the Wisp Juice, scales, I guess you could call it like the old Arch Nemesis loot explosions. It scales that mechanic very well. Think of any time you've ever dropped a Wing Scarabs, big chunks of maps, stacks, like maybe even stacks of currency, or like stacks of 6 links, things like that. It scales that very, very well. Because it scales these Arch Nemesis loot explosions so crazily, if you get as many rare monsters into the map as possible, you get these massive loot explosions, right? So the actual map itself doesn't drop crazy loot. And what I mean by that is our divination card drops haven't been particularly insane, and our drops outside of these big loot explosions aren't particularly insane. But you'll notice, maybe if this is playing some clips, you'll notice that when we do kill Abyss Bombs, or any rare mob for that matter, you get these massive swing loot explosions, right? And that's because of that Arch Nemesis conversion happening. So it's really insane. And so the question is, how do you get as many rares as possible? And it turns out there's a little bit of an interaction, a clever use of game mechanics, you love to see it, with the League mechanic, Multiproj, and Abyss. So this is the core of the strategy, right? I just want to clarify, I just want to say right now, by the way, this is probably the most accessible, cheapest Magic Find thing you'll ever see in Path of Exile, right? It only requires a Gilded Abyss Scarab. Now, unfortunately, can't really be Abyss polished or lower because, as you will see, it is missing one crucial line. So normally an Abyss Scarab gives an additional Abyss, maybe some extra monsters. The Gilded has an extra line on it. Abysses that do not lead to a depth lead to a spire. This essentially guarantees a spire. Now, what these spires do, right, is they're actually a unique monster that will spawn, and it will fire projectiles that will spawn monsters, rare monsters, right? Keyword here, projectile spawns rare monsters. So if you roll multi-proj on your map, you have Wandering Path as well. Wandering Path, we'll get into that later with the Atlas, but that will scale up the modifiers on the map. And so if you have 2 additional projectiles rolled on the map, and this is important, you actually do have to roll multi-proj. This does take a lot of currency, but it's well worth it. That will get scaled up to 3 projectiles, and with 3 projectiles, now all of a sudden the spires are spawning 4 times as many monsters, right? Now that alone is insane, by the way. Already, that's cracked, right? But this is where it gets really lucrative. So we found out, thanks to a clarification by GGG, an update, what each league mechanic does. So what does the purple juice do, blue juice do, yellow juice? You don't need to worry about the other 2. The main thing we want to focus on is the purple juice. The purple juice actually scales AoE and projectiles. So when you get particularly high purple juice count, let's say around the 2-3k mark, you're spawning something like 8 to 10 times as many monsters from this abyss. So we're talking like, and again, if you have maybe 2, 3, even 4 abysses on the map, depending on, you know, Sextants and Scarab type and RNG, you're pumping like hundreds of rare enemies. Hundreds. Far more than any other league mechanic in Path of Exile. It's actually lucrative. So that's the key to the strategy. That's the key. Exploit the fact that rare monsters drop tons of loot, spawn as many rare monsters thanks to this abyss trick as possible, and that's it. There it is. Add a bit of magic find, and we're not even running much, right? By like softcore giga juicer standards, a bit hard to tell, of course, how much I have exactly, but it's something like 45 quant, 256 rarity. I'm not sure if the helmet's factoring in here or if the tinctures or not, but yeah, it's not even that crazy MF. I'm not even running those gold worms. Like I said, I opted for safety just because we were dropping so much loot that it didn't even seem to like be necessary. This is actually worth pointing out as a little bit of a tidbit, but not every map is actually good. So I want to say something like, pulling a number out of nowhere here, but 90% of the juice is the league mechanic. And so if you have done the league mechanic before, you'll be aware that when you're collecting the wisps, it's kind of random, right? Like, what wisp do you get? How many do you get? Do you get any special events? So sometimes you'll get a map with like 1,000, 2,000 juice. This is bad. Sometimes you'll get a map with 6,000 juice, and that especially if they're spread out, that's a priority. You want to spread the map as evenly as possible. Like 2k, 2k, 2k is the dream, and it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible if you can manage to do that. So in terms of the maps and the Atlas, like I said, multi-proj, Gilded Abyss, everything's extra. We chuck in Divination and Reliquary Scarabs, and then we just add in some more rare monsters. There's things like Harby you can put in, Legion you can put in, and Breach is fine too, right? But the key is that Gilded Abyss. Torment is also, Winged Abyss is fine too. It's just an extra Abyss. Now, as for the map tier itself, it's tier 7 because that's all you need to drop a Mage Blood. That turns out to be the right tier to drop a Mage Blood. Obviously, you can go all the way up to tier 16, but it becomes incredibly difficult. Like, insanely difficult. I would think MP's Grip was talking something like hundreds, if not billions of DPS required. It's actually quite extreme. So I would just stick around tier 7. It's all you need to drop some of the rarest items in the game. Div cards seem to be unaffected, so it's fantastic. Now, Sextants. We just have bad Sextants, rare monsters, a bit of rarity, rare monsters again, maybe Breach. Our Sextants are kind of bad. Optimally, you would be going for things like Beyond, you'd be going for things like Delirium, and I will show you the Atlas that we ran over here. So, the core of the Atlas is a Wandering Path Atlas, which will double all these small passives. Keystones also work too. It just means you can't run notables. And you just want to focus on getting as many of the Abyss Chants and Abyss pack size mobs as possible, right? All these lovely additional rares as well, right? You want as many of these Abyss nodes as possible, and then you also want Beyond. But unfortunately, I've noticed as well, you kind of need the Beyond Sextant. We haven't actually had much luck rolling the Sextant. It's obviously nice if you can get it, but we may opt to respec some of these for our like solo bro SF strategy. But you would want Beyond, and you would be running the Beyond Sextant for this. Obviously the Abyss Sextant for the extra Abyss, and the other two Sextants would be Deadly Mirror. You might notice our Atlas doesn't have Delirium on it. All you would need to do for that, slap on Unending Nightmare. This is important. You're running Cemetery. It's not a particularly good Atlas for map for Beyond. This just makes it so that you don't have to worry about a timer. You don't have to worry about backtracking. It will never end the fog, which is fantastic. But again, you would want Delirium Sextant for this. And obviously we have this. This is because I'm a Pathfinder and you don't want to disable your flask due to Thief's Grip. Not technically required. You can save 3 points here quite comfortably on softcore. This is not a ghost busting strategy if you're familiar with that strategy. I'm not even sure if you would want to incorporate it. Doesn't seem necessary. We haven't done much testing into it, but yeah, not required. And then we have just got a bit of the rest of the points, to be honest with you, we just slap them in because the core of the strategy is the quantity nodes on the tree and these modifier nodes that increase the quant and rarity of the map. The actual like other league mechanics other than Abyss don't really matter that much. We have a little bit of Hobby, we have a little bit of Breach, but honestly, straight up, you don't even really need it. If I was gonna prioritize something, it would be the Beyond and the Delirium with those Beyond and Deli Sextants. And again, that last league mechanic is gonna be something like Breach, Legion, or Hobby, and it's not even that big of a deal. It's just more rare monsters in the map, but 95% of your rares are coming from Abyss anyway. So yeah, we'll have a link to this Atlas, but you know, there's a lot of flexibility other than the Abyss, Quant, and modifier nodes. There's actually a lot of flexibility here to meet whatever you want to do. Like if you like Legion, slap it in. It's actually fantastic. It's a lot of rare monsters. The only reason we're not doing Legion is because, again, it's a little bit rippy, and Abyss is most of the juice anyway. So, worth pointing out, actually, real quick, as an extra, we are running Singular Focus. This will mean that you will only drop cemeteries. So, this is fine if we're tier 7, but if you were to bump this up into tier 16s, just be aware that this will hurt your boss drops, your boss maps. So... but it will also give you more maps back, so, you know, it's a trade-off. So, when we're running these maps, obviously, right, I'm not actually going to put the map in, saving the juice for later, but one thing people ask is how do you actually sustain Cemetery? Because, obviously, if you're running 4 Void Stones and you're running 4 Sextants, you can't drop tier 7 maps anymore. It's a little bit, it's a bit annoying to do, but all you have to do to sustain, put the map in, activate it, portals up, and once the portals are up, take out 3 stones. This will now allow you to drop tier 7 maps. You don't even necessarily need to do this all the time. Something I've noticed is you do get these massive loot explosions for maps as well, and so one mob will give you hundreds of maps potentially, and that will give you enough sustain to last you a lifetime. So you don't necessarily have to do this all the time, just until you have enough of a surplus of maps that, you know, you can start to be lazy again. So a little bit of simple tech there to make sure you sustain your maps. So in terms of what we actually do inside of the map, basically we look for trails of the wisps, the different colored wisps. You want to get at least 1k of all 3, ideally. Now that doesn't always happen. In fact, a lot of the times you only get 2, but it's really, really good to get 2 and as many as possible. Now, a bit of a trick here is those little light globe wisps. They're just white little wisps that will actually do 2 things. One of them, the bigger one, will reveal the area nearby. This is okay. It's not bad, but it's not good either. The other one, and this is the big one, will actually recharge your time in the league mechanic, right? And so you'll notice that there's a ring around you of like little, a ring protecting you from the darkness essentially, and it will shrink over time. If you go back to one of those, it will expand back up and you'll have more time in the league mechanic. That is key. There's even some tech where you can go widescreen. Means this obviously don't do this because it looks terrible. Just to see more of those recharges, because they're so important. Now, in terms of what you're prioritizing, maybe you don't know this because you've been skipping it, maybe you don't realize, but the empowered mobs in the league mechanic, they actually give you juice when you kill them. And so any event that has a ton of those monsters is great. And so you might have noticed that every now and then you'll come across clusters of rare monsters in the league mechanic, like a bunch of rare devourers, maybe a bunch of those blue ape monsters. If you kill them, they give you tons of juice. Like tons. I'm talking like 1.5k. Those are what you're looking for. If you get a couple of those, maybe one of each, it's crazy how much loot you'll get. But yeah, just to reiterate, there is a lot of variance in the maps you run, because you're not always going to get like 2k, 2k, 2k. You're not even going to get 6k juice sometimes. Sometimes you'll be left with 2, 3k. It happens, right? You just clear the map, go to the next one. It is what it is. You can still get good loot out of those maps, of course, but the really good juicy maps are those ones with high juice count, 6k plus whips. Those are the ones where you get crazy drops. In terms of why Cemetery and why tier 7, I touched on it briefly earlier, but these maps have 74 mobs. 74 mobs scale up to 76, because rares are +2 and magic is +1. So all magic and rare monsters in a tier 7 cemetery are capable of dropping Mage Blood, Squire, Headhunter. And so it's just the right tier, like just on the precipice of the right tier. You wouldn't want to do tier 6, and you don't need to do tier 8. Tier 7's the perfect tier. Now you could change the map. The reason why particularly Cemetery is it's a beautiful layout, so it's just a square, right? And it has lots of good div cards. It has the GCP card, it has the Coil card, fantastic for us and Bro SF, and more importantly, Brother's Gift and Brother's Stash. These give 5 Divines and 5 Exalts. I do want to again clarify, we're not getting crazy div card drops. It's mostly those unique, rare explosions that we're getting from the Abyss mobs. We're not getting crazy cards. So we've only had one Brother's Stash, I think. One Brother's Stash, and I've personally had 3 Brother's Gift, but that's nothing crazy considering we've run like a decent chunk of maps at this point. Okay, I also just found out from my lovely Twitch chat that there's another reason why we do tier 7 that I didn't even think of. And obviously it makes sense now that I think about it, but you actually need to do red maps to spawn depths. Now, I believe you can only get 1 depths anyway, so it's not a big deal, but another reason to do yellow maps, I guess, is you literally can't spawn the depths, which means you actually are guaranteed a Spire. It's actually 100% guaranteed. So that's actually really good tech that, yeah. But that makes sense. That's very good. Very good. Just as an extra thing as well, you won't get alters running the strategy because of the low tier. Again, this is totally fine. It would be nice to have, but you gotta understand that the difference between tier 16 and tier 7 is tremendous. It's gonna make it much more difficult. You're gonna need infinity damage, right? Much easier to do tier 7, but you lose the altars, and you also want to be running Abyss. Now, you can't see this on my screen, but that's where, if you look at this page here, you'll notice that we have these little keystones allocated. The Cryptic Gateway, Eldritch Gateway, leading up to the 7th gate. Now, this will allow you to add Abyss onto the map device. And that, obviously, again, Abyss is key. You wanna be putting that Abyss on. Luckily, it's only 2C, so it's very cheap and gives you that extra Abyss, which is very nice. Oh yeah, and just in case Ziz doesn't mention it, yoink this strategy from our boy Goratha, who may or may not have gotten it from somewhere else, but shout out to Goratha. That's where we got the strategy from. It's very good and totally SSF viable. Again, as long as you have those Gilded Abyss Scarabs, those are the key.
Anyway, I hope you guys like this collab guide with me and Steelmage, one of my best friends and an amazing creator. So make sure you check him out. Does great YouTube content and Twitch content. So make sure you check out his YouTube if you're unfamiliar with it already. His editor Toad has been doing really good work there. And yeah, we were happy to be able to bring this guide for you. And if you want any friends, there will be people on my Discord trying to get people to do this with. It's incredibly profitable. We found so many items in the first session. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. Thanks for watching. Sub if you like it, but more importantly, try to die less than I do.